It's Edge Match. Edge Match. It's Edge Match. You're at Edge Match. Edge Match. Don't miss Edge Match. Don't miss Edge Match. You're at Edge Match. Edge Match. Don't miss Edge Match. Don't miss Edge Match.
Hey everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Edge Match. I am so excited because today I get to talk with my new friend, Dr. Ed C. Dr.
Yes.
Edward C. Okay, great to have you here. So we connected at Q. Just
we were right across from each other. You you had an awesome booth down there. I'm so glad I was able to connect.
Oh my goodness, and the feeling is mutual. Like just everything, like your whole vibe and all of the great work you're doing. Like I was just like, oh, this guy is just amazing. So definitely, I'm super excited to have you here. So just for everyone who doesn't already know you, I'll tell them what you have shared on your LinkedIn, and after that, if there's anything that you want to add. But you said that as a parent, you were deeply concerned about how we're going to make education relevant for careers that don't even exist today. Just as a loving parent exposes their child to art, music, and sports, you believe that natural interfaces can expose children to new forms of expression. So that is awesome. That is awesome. So tell us a little bit more about you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So diving into a little bit about why I got into education in the first place. For me, school was always this thing that I struggled a lot with personally, simply because it was very boring. It was this kind of everybody told you what to do, when to do it. And I struggled with it, just didn't really have a strong interest in it until I think around grade 7, where I had a French language arts teacher kind of mention, oh, but he's creative. And so if I give him some opportunities to be creative in class, then he's going to be much more interested in what I'm teaching. And creativity really changed everything for me when it comes to education. It's one of the reasons why I suddenly turned around and said, I need to start learning this stuff at school. I spent a lot more time learning the materials so I could be creative. And then that's kind of what led me to pursuing higher education, the master's, and then the PhD as well, was just these opportunities to be, I just felt it was just all part of the creativity process. So lately, one of the reasons for me to be involved in education has always been trying to inspire that type of creativity. I feel that for a lot of students who struggle in class, that may be one way to get into it. And one of the reasons why I talk a lot about the natural user interface is because we're doing stuff now with our phones that, you used to have an entire studio, you used to have a lot of expensive equipment, but anyone can just do it nowadays. So it takes those creative endeavors that people used to do, and it just makes it accessible to everyone. And so really it's the simplicity of the phones, that ease of use at the younger ages, that is enabling creativity at a more global scale and at younger ages. And it's one of the reasons why I'm really excited to work with a company that specifically works with natural user interface. It's called NUI-Tech. And it's the NUI is natural user interface and technologies. And I'm really excited to be working with them because I feel that there's a big role to play in the educational space, to making it just easier to explore different forms of creative expression at younger ages.
Ooh, I love it. Okay, definitely. About that whole creation, that creation side, and at a young age. And it's funny because I was going to ask you what's nuit. I was thinking French. I looked at it, I was just like, oh, it's a night, but that's cool. NUI-Tech. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And natural user interfaces are it comes from my background as a researcher. So most of my research is in kind of the area of human-computer interaction. And we talk a lot about natural user interfaces from different perspectives. One is they could be simple things like touch screens, but it's more about what feels natural. It's this type of higher level of usability where somebody can walk up to an interface and feel like a natural when they first come up to it. So it isn't nearly as intimidating as, oh, this interface, we call it the WIMP interface, as kind of the direct contrast, the Windows icons menu pointer type interface, where everything's hidden inside a menu. It's how do I figure out how to use it? So with the natural user interface, everything is usually visible. It's kind of direct manipulation. It's very easy to get into. And so it's one of the reasons that it's one of the causes of this kind of explosion. Everybody is able to access touchscreens or access computing nowadays, whereas you used to have some expertise in order to, say, even just use a mouse and the keyboard. And so a lot of that need is kind of going away, and we're trying to make things even easier to use.
Nice. Okay, so I just learned something there. I had no idea about like the WIMP interface. Was that the other one?
The Wimpy interface.
The Wimpy interface. Yeah. So I just got schooled. So that is awesome. That is awesome. So I noticed that you were doing a lot of connecting when I saw you at CUE. Like you had your camera, you were recording a lot of folks. So you connect a lot. So what are some of your like major takeaways that you've had with connecting with educators?
You know, for me, the thing I love about connecting with educators, because my particular background is mostly in research usability, which is like psychology, computer science combination, is that I'm learning a lot about the field of education by connecting with all these thought leaders. And sometimes when you hear many of their thoughts, many of them point in the same direction. Many of them are saying, like, a lot of the things that we're learning in school today isn't really going to be useful for future careers. We do need to focus more on those 21st century skills, the creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, communication skills. And they're looking at different ways of using technology as like an engagement tool. And I do feel that, you know, I hear this a lot, like, there are technologies that are fundamentally changing education. And when I think that some of the thought leaders in education are clearly seeing these trends, and they're doing a lot more with interactive video, for example, or maybe just having video in general in their classrooms. And that's one trend that I'm very interested in as well at NUI Tech. Like we focus a lot on how we can have we called like video linked lessons. So for example, you got a YouTube video and then you've got complementary hands-on activities. And the reason for this is like it's hard to remember stuff if you don't have if you just watch the video, because there's this fluency illusion that you feel like you have high confidence, you understand, but the reality is if I tested you, you wouldn't actually recall. You have to, it's not just putting information in, you have to take stuff out. And when you start taking stuff out, and there's different ways that different educators or different thought leaders in education use, but that act of forcing you to use the knowledge that you have tends to help with the recall. And so that's something that I'm pretty excited about when I talk to these thought leaders, because they're all speaking the same type of language. They have different approaches of engagement, but the goal has always been the same. Like the feeling I've always had with especially with creativity is that sometimes when we have creativity, you kind of trigger it's this opportunity for self-expression for learners, which is a trigger for their own intrinsic motivation. When they can talk a little bit about who they are as a person through their homework, they're going to be more motivated to do that at home. That would be homework worth doing, for example.
I like that. Mm-hmm. So that connection to self, absolutely. That really helps to engage our students. Definitely. Mm-hmm. So you're obviously very passionate about this. So what fueled your passion for technology and for interfaces and for all of these nuggets that you're sharing with us right now?
I kind of mentioned it earlier, like creativity is definitely a huge factor for the passion about it, but it's really that opportunity to connect with, I do feel that educators are some of the more passionate people on the planet. Like you kind of have to be in order to connect with your students. Like if you're not motivated, why would somebody else be interested in watching, say, the videos or whatever, or the lectures that you're presenting? So I feel like it's kind of this requirement, and it kind of energizes me again. It's like when I speak to every educator, I always feel like kind of a little bit energized by them because they're really dynamic speakers. And so I think in the same way, we kind of work off each other. So I love the energy of other educators, and that's one of the things that kind of drives a lot of what we do, is trying to provide this, I don't know, like this more firsthand view. I mean, there's lots of ways to say like, oh, you should do this or you should do that. But no, just hear from the expert. And I'm really excited to hear that firsthand myself. And I hope that when the audience listens to the channel, they get to hear that firsthand view of what does that person say directly from their perspective. It's not me listening to them and then interpreting what should be done. It's like you get to hear everything firsthand.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And your videos are amazing. So you have this great channel on YouTube. So everybody should check it out. It's called Ed on EdTech. And you're sharing like this amazing content frequently with your audience. So tell us, if you could tell us a little bit about it and how you got started, and maybe any tips that you have for people who want to start creating content.
Yeah, you bet. So with the channel, Ed on EdTech, it was just this fun kind of idea to begin with. We started off with asking the question of, well, what should we be doing? And my role at NUITech was, at the time, a strategy director role. So I was really trying to figure out the direction for the product roadmap, some of the video roadmap, those types of things, like what would we end up doing? And so I just figured, well, why don't we just go and interview a bunch of people? And we worked together and we said, we're going to these conferences anyway, so why don't we see if there's people who'd be interested in kind of mentioning it? And we said, okay, let's we kind of evolved where we started off by just asking people directly. So we would look on Twitter and try to find people who were definitely influencers in ed tech. And we had several really, really great interviews that I learned a lot, and we used that for our strategy. And then since we were going to the conferences, we figured, well, this might be another opportunity to meet people face to face. And we've really enjoyed that because you get this kind of very authentic view, because like we're reacting kind of in real time. It was really, really, it was a really pleasant experience, like, because you're also building that relationship at the same time. And I feel that especially when it comes to influence, it's really just like relationships that are built over a long period of time. And so when I started, seriously, like the only person who was watching my channel, I swear, was my mom. And it took me like over like a year and a half before we go to like any ed tech conference and anybody would actually recognize who I was. I would just be walking around with a camera and people are like, what is this? But nowadays, like there are some people that I've seen and I've built relationships with, and then when I see them at conferences, I'm like, oh, it's you again. So I do feel that it's a long game for this, but I do feel when you're building the relationships, and that's what the channel is about, is building those kind of long-term relationships. I try not to have too much stuff like that's very specifically about like selling a particular product. I really try to focus on what are the values that teacher has or that educator has, so that we can share that with the community. Gotcha.
That is cool. And I remember like when you came around with your camera, you had like this really like sick gear. So what do you use to shoot on?
Oh, so I'll show you what I used to shoot on. So what I used to have was like a larger digital SLR, and then I put the like a Rode VideoMic Pro on top of it, and then it had like a really thick, kind of like a tripod, like a GorillaPod that was on there. So the typical vlog setup that most YouTubers used. And then ever since then, I switched over to a DJI Osmo Plus. So I used to use a gimbal stabilizer that would just stabilize my phone. And so they sell a product called DJI Osmo, which was pretty good. But of course, there's limitations with the phone itself. And so I switched over to it's called an Osmo Mobile. Mm-hmm. So it has like a little microphone on it. Then it has a camera that is like, it's stabilized this way. Mm-hmm. And you can use the phone as a monitor. So you can kind of remote control it, which is really helpful if you are like kind of solo running and gunning, because it's hard to keep the camera stable. And that was one of the challenges I found with the other setup I had, is that it would shake a lot and would move. And so this would kind of be like having a separate camera person around to help with the recording. And so it's kind of a little bit like slightly, I don't know, I say this is like way lighter than what I used to have with the digital SLR. And in terms of convenience, it's definitely there. And so I've been pretty happy with it so far. Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah, I saw it. I was just like, whoa, what is that? But yeah, super cool, super cool. So switching gears slightly. So you have a great website. So everybody, if you're not following him on Twitter, then follow him, and we'll get your Twitter very soon, Dr. Edwards. So, but on there, it took me to your website where I saw all of your social media. So I went on your LinkedIn, and I saw that you invented the smart table with along with many other things. But the smart table, like when I saw that, I was like, oh, because I've seen the smart table at like every conference I've been at. So
Nice.
yeah, so how did that come about, and what tips might you have regarding innovation?
So when I was doing my PhD, I specifically worked on an area called multimodal co-located interaction, which is a fancy way of saying speech and gestures over tables and wall displays. And one of my thesis projects, it was kind of like fun games. So people could like play Warcraft 3, and they could say like put two hands on the table and say label is unit 1, move here, build a farm here, attack here. Like you could do like different commands using just your voice, and you could use speech. And it was a super early YouTube video. I think this is like 2004. 2005 that I published this video that it's like one of the super early like YouTube videos that went viral at the time. And it was a neat experience, but the company Smart Technologies pursued me after I finished my PhD saying, we're really interested in taking what you did in your PhD and then applying it to the education context. And so what happened is I was brought in as a postdoc at Smart Technologies, where my research project was to do a education-based table. And that research project was then presented to the CEO at the time. And I remember this meeting specifically with Nancy Knowlton, who was the CEO of Smart at the time, who I presented like, here's the table, here's some of the activities that we could do. We thought it was kind of neat. And I made the comment, well, if this ever became a product, it would be able to do these things. And she stopped me and she said, no, not if it's going to be a product. It is going to be a product. We have made she made the decision. It felt like she made the decision on the spot, either that or before she met me. And it was this incredible journey over a few years of just taking this research idea and then turning it into a commercial product. I learned so much. I worked with so many different teams. And so I'm not the only one involved. I was just, I describe it as like primary inventor because I probably have my name on the most number of patents related to the smart table. But it was like hardware stuff and, and software as well. I was mostly involved with the software, but had some impact on the hardware as well. And it was a really incredible learning experience. And it was neat. Like from there, that's where I kind of really learned the importance of this is a totally new way of doing things. So you're asking people to change the way that they're learning. And you talked about innovation. I feel that like really when it comes to new technologies, I think the real key here is just the availability of content on that particular platform. People want to use your stuff. They just don't want to go and build everything from scratch. Like we had nice tools, we built software for it. But what we found, which was the hardest thing, was building content took a lot of time, and time is a very scarce resource in the teaching environment. And so at NUITech, actually, my role has changed to like the VP of strategy and content, simply because content is such a big factor, and having stuff that is like aligned to the curriculum standards of different states, having stuff that has like, say, it's just a YouTube video, but it also has hands-on activities, and then maybe afterwards it's got like a worksheet or something that you can work with. Having all that in advance means that the teachers can spend a lot less time doing the classroom prep, and it actually has to save them time. This is the challenge with most technology, is that it takes more time to do than if you provide the content, then you can actually save them time. And that's kind of the big learning, was that you have to save time. Otherwise, either you have to improve grades, like improve test scores, or you've got to save time. Otherwise, what are you doing in the technology space? So that it was a good learning experience for me. And when I come to innovation, like I remember doing a presentation at the iOS programming class, and I said that, if you're trying to ensure that your iOS app is going to survive the zombie apocalypse of all the different apps that are available out there, I think creativity is like your double-barreled shotgun that's going to get you through the main crowd. But the thing that's going to keep, like the moat that is going to keep like the zombies away forever is really that content, right? So once you have the content, it becomes very difficult for other people to kind of get into your space. And so lately, content has been a big factor for the work that I've been doing with NuiTech.
Wow. Okay. That was amazing. Okay. So many takeaways from that. So definitely the content, having the content on hand. I love what you said about the creativity. It'll get you through the crowd, but the content will be the moat keeping the zombies out. So I love that.
Edge match. It's Edge match.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more learning.
The Teacher's Journey takes a deeper look at how we grow, learn, and succeed in the world of education. Throughout the book, you'll follow the journey of 7 incredible educators that share their trials and triumphs as they walk along their own journey. The Teacher's Journey will challenge you to reflect on who you are and why you are in education, while providing personal examples and practical tools to use right now. Pairing with the book is the Teacher's Journey podcast. There you can hear great educators as they reflect upon their journey and share the lessons they have learned along the way. You can find more information about the book, the podcast, and lots more by visiting CostelloCorner.com, where you can also sign up for exclusive access to information, graphics, and educational training resources.
Edge match. It's Edge match.
You are now listening to the EduMatch podcast.
Edge match.
I also love the fact that this came all from your dissertation. So we have a lot of viewers and listeners who are in doctorate programs or master's programs themselves. So for me, it took me like 10 and a half years to get through, like no lie. It was insanity. So I did not do a great job managing my time. But what tips would you have for anyone who's listening right now who wants to know how to manage their time in an advanced degree program?
Managing time. Well, so I took a lot less time for my PhD, partly because I did a master's, like I finished a master's first. And, the master's, I think, was 2 years. And I think I finished my PhD in about 2.5 after that. So in total, maybe 5.5. And I think the key for me was those conference publication deadlines. So we just looked at those conferences and we said, when's the next conference? And we tried to time all of our research to coincide with those conference deadlines so that by the time I had, and this was the key for me, was like thesis writing, because it's this big, massive thing, you kind of have to do it in parts. So each one became a paper. And so I think we had 7, 8 papers from the thesis that each one could become its own chapter. And we had the opportunity to revise it and to get lots of feedback because those conference deadlines meant that we got a lot of review. And so really you could just take all those papers together, staple them together and add a little bit of content, obviously, because it's a thesis, you need to be a little bit more complete. But most of it was vetted. It was all already insured and it was peer reviewed and it was accepted as a paper. And I think that really helped. But I think to a certain extent, though, we were really lucky. Was it luck? So I'll tell you a story. So when I was doing my PhD thesis, I was actually in Cambridge at the time in Massachusetts or Boston. And I was working with a company called Mitsubishi Electric Research Labs. And my supervisor at the time, Cha Shen, she was working in the area of tables. And so I had asked her, we were doing some research on how to recognize gestures on this table. And I asked her, I'm really interested in computer games. Would I be able to do like a research project on computer games? And she said no. And so I did it anyways. Like I came in on the weekend, I did this project, and that was my first, like, it was like Warcraft 3 and Google Earth on a digital table where you could use like voice commands and stuff. And I showed it to her like on the Monday. I was like so pumped, and I wasn't sure how she was going to react because, I mean, obviously I'd done what she hadn't asked me to do. And yeah, she said like, oh, this is really good. You know, like we could write some papers about it. That work ended up being my thesis.
Oh.
So I guess my message is always, you know, like, don't let other people limit your creativity. I think sometimes you never know what's going to happen right out of it. But sometimes when you're truly like, you have that freedom to be creative. Like I remember when I first started my PhD, I really wanted to work on really cheap mobile phones, and mobile phones at the time were like the flip WAP phones. And they weren't like, they were really limiting in terms of what you could do. And the prof that I worked with, Saul Greenberg, he said, you know, why work on like the current technology? Why don't just assume that in 10 years from now, your desktop computer is going to have the same computing power as what's inside your phones, like that you'll be able to access, and then just figure out what you want to do. And so his key message, it was something that stuck with me, is to never let the current state of technology or people or your supervisors limit your creativity. Because when you do that, you're really limiting the possibilities that can be out there. And I think there needs to be that academic freedom to be creative in order to really come up with the next thing, come up with the thing that's going to get the papers in. And I felt that was something that was a key message or a key theme that came out of my thesis that has stuck with me since, that, you know, no matter what career I do, like creativity has to be a really important part of it, especially if we're trying to be like in a competitive situation. Customers or teachers have many, many different options in terms of what they can choose. So you really need to come up with out of the box solutions. If you do what other people are doing, that's not going to be enough to really separate you from the competition.
Wow. So it seems like creativity has kind of been a theme throughout your life. So that is, that is amazing. That is amazing. And I love what you were saying about like how you would align your conference presentations, like your papers for that with your thesis. Like that is genius. Like I never even thought of that. I would like make my term papers about it, but it wasn't peer reviewed, you know, but yeah. So that is incredible. I love that. So you are doing so many amazing things. What are some things that we can expect to see from you in the near future?
You know, that's a really great question. Like right now, we are really focused on the content side, but I very much ascribe to Kathy Davidson's book, The New Education, in that she says that we're going to see more changes in the field of education over the next 5-10 years than we've seen in the last 100. And the reason for that is because if you look at the world of work, like education changed because work changed, right? Like you couldn't get the same types of jobs. In the same way, education has to change because the world of work is also changing in the same way. We're seeing automation. Like I was very excited about the potential of like an automated vehicle fleet, for example. But there are a large number of people for which, you know, driving from one place to the other is their career. And so there is this need to re-educate a large portion of the society to focus a lot more on those creativity, like those engagement skills. And I do feel that, you know, really, for me, the focus I'm hoping is going to be a lot more on what we can do with online video. I feel that in terms of the content, it's definitely there. We're getting to the point where there's kind of like a free online version of kind of video-based learning. May not be as good as, say, a direct, like kind of having a one-on-one with a teacher, but for a lot of people, it may be good enough, and it may be the only option, especially if you're in places where a school is not easily accessible. And so I do feel that there's already kind of a big shift going on in terms of how adults learn. I mean, if you wanted to learn how to do something, instead of reading the book, you probably go straight up to the YouTube video nowadays. Yep. Right. And so given that it's already changed how adults learn, it's probably just a matter of time where that needs to be more incorporated into how we learn in school as well. And if you look at like this generation, especially Generation Z, there's just so much more emphasis on social media. Like they're social natives now. And so more stuff that kind of leverages the ways that they express themselves online so that it can be used towards like, so the creative output, for example, of their assignments or what they learn is going to be beneficial for education. So to me, those are two areas that I see as being really, really strong. Like there's going to be a lot of growth potential simply because that's where the students, we have to go where the students are, and they're already going and watching those YouTube videos. They're already on Snapchat or TikTok or those other social media that are very video based. So you've got to meet them where they are. And I feel that, you know, there's really good opportunities to take that and then add some more hands-on activity. So it's not just this mind-numbing consumption of content, but they're actually creating as well. And so I'm hoping that, you know, through some of our work, we will be able to encourage more students to be creative in their everyday work using the methods of creativity or expression that they're already comfortable with.
Love that. Oh my goodness. Like we are here right now because just like everything you said is so on point. Like I was just doing some research for a project, like you know, a book project like about a year ago. And same thing that you just said, that's really what I saw as being like what has shaped the last 10 years and what is going to continue to shape the future. So like social media, like you said, devices. So you talked about like the computing power that's now in the phones. And in addition, AI, so automation, those three things, boom, boom, boom. So we are here. so I hear you on that. And of course, creativity, as you mentioned. So
yeah, well, I emphasize those things as well. Like the 21st century skills are also the 21st century skills because they're the things that computers have the hardest time doing. So critical thinking is actually really difficult for computers. So it's very difficult even for an AI to know that this is appropriate and this is inappropriate. Good versus bad is a very difficult thing for a computer to determine. Creativity is another thing that is very difficult for computers to do that is kind of aesthetically pleasing or something that is kind of something that you would want to consume or you would want to see. So all of these skills are really, really important because they're the things that are not going to be automated. They're the things that are not going to go away. I do feel like some of the mechanical stuff, like, I don't know, I would love to see just regular kind of slide style presentations go away completely because I feel that, you know, for that, I mean, yes, you could record it, but even if you recorded it and say you put it up on YouTube, nobody would want to watch it because it's so dry and so boring. So, you know, what I'm finding even with the way that people are teaching through video, it's like super compelling. I mean, the game theorists or the film theorists, they use the latest film that's come out and they talk about the science behind some of that. And I find that to be a really great way because you've already got the interest there and now they're just bringing in the student to the educational component. So I do see like that type of stuff changing quite a bit. And so, yeah, absolutely. Like I love what you're mentioning. Like AI to me is just a fascinating area. And I was really encouraged to even see like other teachers that are just starting to go, hey, kids, why don't you prototype things with AI? Like when I went to school, I had to build everything from scratch. I had to code all these mechanisms. Like our way of detecting gestures was in AI, but there was no tool, there was no Microsoft Azure that you could just, you know, plug and play and drag, you know, AI blocks in. It wasn't that easy. It was like a very difficult task, but I'm very pleased to see like that's where technology goes is over time. Those things that were really, really difficult, like we didn't have Unity at the time. We couldn't just rapidly prototype a game in, you know, a day or so. But, you know, over time, those things that were really, that you needed a team to do, now one person can do on their own. It just opens up creativity to a lot more people at much younger ages.
Love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. So I'm like so inspired right now talking with you. So this is amazing. So thank you so much for taking the time out to chat with us. So could you tell our listeners and our viewers how to get in touch with you online?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a Twitter account. It's at Dr. ET, so DOCTORET. That's one way to get in contact with me. I'm also on Instagram at dr.et. There are other ways, like I have the YouTube channel called Ed on EdTech. You can just search for Ed on EdTech, and you typically find some of the videos that I have. And, you may see me around at conferences. Like if you go to ISTE or if you go to a lot of like CUE, I'm typically trying to attend a few of these per year just to make sure that, I'm able to connect with the community in person. So if you're ever interested in doing something like an interview or something like that, I typically will record the interview at the conference, and then we'll spend a few weeks, and then we'll process everything and then produce a video. And that's a great way to kind of get exposure to my audience, but also to just build that relationship, to connect with people. And that's, for me, the main goal is I'd love to connect with you, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about what it is that, what's your why? Why do you teach? And a little bit more about yourself. So for me, this is all about building relationships.
Awesome. And definitely we're in this together. So, yep, same here. EduMatch. This is not a dating site, contrary to popular belief, but just a way for people.
But it's kind of, it has some aspects in it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely that matchmaking component, but not in a romantic sense, more in a learning sense. So, totally. Well, wanted to thank you again. So we're going to put this out on Facebook, on YouTube, as well as an audio, as well as an audio podcast. There we go. on Podbean. So, super excited. So very grateful for your time. Thank you so much. And thank you to our viewers and our listeners, and
Yes.
Catch y'all soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's Edge Match. Edge Match. It's Edge Match. You're at Edge Match.